Clara. Hello and welcome back to coverage here at Grand Prix Santa Clara. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. I'm in the booth with Eduardo Sajgalik, and we are all set for round 8 action. This is the cut. This is the last chance these players have to try to make the cut to day number 2. And as you can see, we've got Gail Henberger, John Rowe, and Donnie Yeh playing against Paul Rietzl, Steve Rubin, and Andrew Cuneo. Let's get underway here. As is our custom today, we're going to start off with Modern. We've been doing that quite a bit. We will jump over to Legacy, and then, if we must, we will check out Standard as well. Steve Rubin against John Rowe. And do we have an idea for what these two are playing here, Eduardo?
Yes. So
I have an idea now. I just saw Valakut.
And Fotsies. Does that? Yeah. So they are on Death Shadow. Grix's Death Shadow for Steve Rubin and Red-Green Valakut for John Rowe. One interesting aspect here is you could have actually told what their decks were from that first Fotsy, the first free cards that hit play. The Bloodstained Mire, the Watery Grave, and the Fotsies. The Bloodstained Mire into Watery Grave untapped usually tells you I'm on Death Shadow, because the blue decks that don't want to take damage will not go Watery Grave into Fotsies. That is too much damage for a control deck.
They're at 15 already.
Right. So you can tell that they're on Shadow. And of course, the Fotsies tells us that they're on Valakut.
Now, what are we looking at as far as the matchup goes here, Eduardo? We've seen Death Shadow decks in different forms for quite a while here in Modern. We kind of know what it's doing. How does it match up though against John Rowe and his? Well, I saw Prismatic Omen. That type of Valakut deck.
Right. So what Steve Rubin is going to try to achieve in the early game is, if he can, decline ramp spells like Farseek. The number of lands in play for John allow him to pull ahead. So Steve is going to try to stop that as much as possible. And basically, the way you can see if Steve's winning is if he's putting on a clock. If he doesn't put on a clock, he's probably in trouble. So he needs to get a clock next turn, most likely, to start the pressure, because John Rowe is just going to make his land drop. He's just going to very slowly get there. So, yeah, especially because John seems to have drawn a Colony Heart Expedition.
He did, yeah, I saw that.
Right, so Colony Heart allows basically any land drop to be good. But yeah, Steve Rubin is probably going to Stubborn Denial this Colony Heart Expedition, because he can Stubborn Denial later a Scape Shift with a Snapcaster Mage.
Yeah,
so,
Colony Heart Expedition is responsible for a lot of lands. That's a powerful spell.
Yeah, it makes sense here to counter it, just to prevent John from having an easy way to climb out of this game. Steve knows John's hand. He knows that it's probably quite clunky if he gets rid of this Colony Heart Expedition. So as long as Steve can disrupt John in the early turns, put pressure, then his game plan is maximized. So seeing if Steve is doing well is, can he play a Fret this turn? That would be the health sign for me, is if Steve plays a Fret out, it doesn't matter what it is, a Gurmag Angler, a Tasigur, Death Shadow would be obviously optimal, then he's ahead. However, it seems that...
The answer is no.
No. So
he could do a Snapcaster Mage for a Thought Scour, for a Thought Scour, but...
Yeah, so... Here, Steve basically has to decide whether or not he wants the Fotsies with Snapcaster, or try his luck with an Opt to get into a Fret. I think the Snapcaster is best because of efficiency, and because Steve also seems to have a Temur Battle Rage. That Temur Battle Rage essentially allows him to catch up a turn. So it's okay if this turn is still Disruption. But he is going to go to a very low life total. Thankfully for him, John only runs 3 Lightning Bolts, but that is a card he does have to be careful about. He also knows that John has access to Prismatic Omen, so if he Fotseizes him, he probably is priced into taking the Omen, because it's very easy for the Omen to kill Steve since his life total is so low.
Oh, wow. He's got a pair of Scape Shifts now. Yeah,
so 2 mountains, the Omen and the Scape Shifts. When your opponent has redundant cards, it's usually better to get the one that's non-redundant. So in this case, yeah, Steve gets the Omen, which makes sense because the Omen is basically a ramp spell in a way, since John would probably only need to get to 6 lands to win against Steve. But yeah. Now John's like kind of out of resources. Scape Shift isn't a resource; it's a kill condition.
Yeah, he drew Hour of Promise for the turn. He's still 2 turns away from casting that. So a lot of time here for Rubin. And while he does have the Snapcaster Mage that can start chipping away, like you said, he really wants to find one of his bigger threats like a Death Shadow.
Yeah. Death Shadow would be by far the best threat. But to be honest, even a Gurmag Angler would get the job done with Battle Rage. It's a free turn clock. And Steve has access to Snapcaster dealing damage, +1 in hand to Stubborn Denial. So Gurmag Angler will do the job very quickly.
Doesn't have one. Just passes the turn back again.
Right. So this gets a little more tense. John also drew one of his Lightning Bolts and has plenty of mana to pay for Stubborn Denial since there's no threat with 4.
This gets kind of interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah. So John might most likely win if he draws another bolt. But it might have to be as soon as this turn.
Will Steve Rubin play around Lightning Bolt? Remember, he knows all up until the last draw step from John and knows that there wasn't, ooh, uh-oh.
Yeah, so to answer your question there, yes, he will. And the reason for that is Temur Battle Rage is more than enough damage.
Right, he can afford to.
Yes, exactly. Right, so Battle Rage.
Game, as they say in the business.
Yeah.
He's attacking for
John,
20 here,
yeah.
So all right, good game.
Yeah. And
that is going to be game 1. Going to Steve Rubin, kind of easy, right? I mean, Thought Cast, Snap, Thought Cast, just killed him. Eventually did find the big threat, and that was it.
Yeah, that's as I was mentioning, once you get that threat online, you disrupt, then fret. You set up, disrupt, fret. And Steve just disrupted a little more. Mm-hmm. And then he got his threat, and that was it.
And then the game ended. Sometimes Magic's easy, I guess.
Right. Not when
you play the thing that you were hoping.
What about when you're playing this deck? Is it easy?
Which one? The Storm?
Yes.
No, not easy. I don't care what anybody says who plays Storm. Storm is hard. It is punishing, right? Like, that's the thing is that, like, if you decide to try to go off and you were wrong, you lose the game. Like, It's very difficult to come back from those types of scenarios.
That is actually the most accurate statement about Storm. It might not. It's hard in a different way than most Magic decks are. I mean, here he was just comboing off, and that was great here. Storm fan here, by the way.
Yeah, I can tell. I get in that vibe.
But yeah, just to finish off kind of on Storm there. Yeah, basically, you're right. It is punishing. You might have to take a line, and if you're wrong, you discard your whole hand, for example.
Yeah. Tap all your lands, discard your hand, go ahead.
Yeah. I've played Storm many a time and go like, okay, I guess I'm going to go off turn 1, and then my opponent goes Force of Will. I'm like, well, I have this Underground Sea and no cards. Let's see if I can win. That game specifically actually did, which was very impressive.
Ooh.
Yeah. My opponent had a very clunky draw, so I got there. But yeah, here we have, speaking of clunky.
Holy smokes, this is a well-built-out board. Look at this. A pair of Walking Blisses to the tune of 3/3 and 2/2.
Yeah. This would all be incredible if it wasn't for that Harsh Mentor.
Right. So every time Paul activates one of those, you take 2.
Yes.
Gale just says, take
right.
2.
So
but does Gale have a way to actually push through this pretty beefy board on Paul Rietzl's side to get those last 5 points of damage through?
Well, actually, to reverse your question, does Paul have any way to punch through points of damage?
I would assume no.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, there we go.
On-Crop Crasher, that's a way to push through some damage.
Yeah, Menace Creature plus Ancrop Crasher is probably going to do a pretty nice trick, especially with the monkey that's coming off Carry Zev.
You mean Ragavan?
Ragavan.
How dare you disrespect Ragavan by calling him just the monkey? He's a unique, legendary monkey who graces you with his presence on occasion and then, of course, scurries away right away. But
capital T. The monkey.
Oh, I didn't get the capital T on the the. Oh, my fault.
It's all good.
I didn't give you enough credit, did I, Eduardo?
Yeah. He is definitely the monkey. I want to see a board state where somehow he stays in play.
I'd like that, too.
Yeah.
There has to be some card that says that trigger doesn't happen.
Your opponent would have to Nimble Obstruction as the Ragavan, is my best guess.
Can I stifle the Ragavan?
Unfortunately, Nimble Obstructionist is you can stifle it, but like the actual card stifle. But
I'm thinking about going back in time here. I'm going to play Ragavan in Legacy.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, you can stifle.
Yes, I did it. Nimble Obstructionist, of course, only for your opponent's stuff.
Yeah,
so you don't have to counter its own ability.
Or disallow in Standard. That's great. But yeah, here Gale is considering his attack, and maybe I'll take some time here to break it down, because this is a pretty complicated board state, and we're also jumping in, which doesn't help matters. So essentially here...
Paul is activating a Ballista.
Yeah. Gale would be attacking with 6 creatures into 4 blockers, disabling one of them. So Paul here decides, I have to kill this Harsh Mentor. And yeah, that allows him to keep using up his Ballistas. So he adds mana with the Ballistas.
They have counters, and Rishkar helps.
Right, exactly.
Gives them that ability. Okay.
Yeah. Right, so like adding the counters doesn't deal damage now because the Harsh Mentor's gone.
Yeah.
Paul decides like the End-Crop Crasher gets rid of 2 creatures anyways. But yeah, this looks pretty much over. Since
Paul would have to lose a Ballista here to kill Ragavan. How can he get out of this? There's 2 Menace creatures.
Yeah, that's true.
I think he's just dead.
Yeah, pretty much. The Carrie Zev and Ferocidon are going to do the job.
Get in with the Soulscar Mage.
Yeah, Gale is making sure.
This was a complicated board, but it has become much less complicated than it was. There you go.
Yeah.
Send him in. Get capital V Monkey.
Yeah.
And what can he do? So he can Ballista down the monkey. He can die.
Right. He can take his permanents into...
He can properly randomize his library for game 2. All right.
Exactly. One thing that was fascinating to me there was like Gale was just double checking. And when I watch normally tournaments go down to stretch, people tend to play at a slower pace when it seems obvious, or like when the play seems obvious, because they want to make sure that they're going to survive the cut. And you're in a team tournament. They want to make sure they're not disappointing their friends. They want to make sure that they are doing the best for their team. So that's where you saw Gale take his time there. He just wanted to make sure. It looked really obvious even from our perspective, like what can Paul do? It doesn't seem possible. But Gale just wanted to make sure. He wanted to be safe. There was no need. He didn't need to rush. He could just take the 30 seconds to survey the board, check his creatures. We're going to get through.
Her creatures, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, her creatures. So
But and that was smart, right?
Yeah.
Especially, I don't know, you're probably used to it by now because you played on the PT for so long. But like Paul Rietzl is so utterly methodical and so good. He's intimidating. Like, not his personality. He's actually a nice guy.
Yes.
But you're just like, he's not going to miss anything, right? And like, he does some weird thing where like, oh, I'm going to tap these for mana, and you're like, wait, what's going on? And he shows you, and you're just like, okay, right, I forgot. And then, like you feel like I'm outclassed here, I played against Paul. It's scary, man.
Yeah, very, very a gentleman, though.
Oh, absolutely.
But
he's a class act for sure.
The first time I met him, he helped me get to the airport in time for my flight back home.
Really?
Yeah. I was. Do
you remember when that was?
2011. I still remember, yeah. He was like, look, my flight's like also in little time, but mine's domestic, yours international. We'll just drop you off first, like. And he was in a rush too, so like, yeah. But
so that was really nice of him.
Yeah, it's also true that Paul is a usually known for his aggressive decks.
Yes.
So Greenpelt Ravager, not totally out of his range, but it's interesting that he was the one facing down the red deck rather than playing it.
Yeah, that is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So we're in shuffle cam here, it looks like, although maybe Cuneo's underway. Oh, it looks like we're fixing a camera up there. I can see that now. So just to recap the round here, these teams are both 5-2, and they are playing for elimination. The loser of this round, they're not coming back tomorrow. They're going to have to play in the PTQ or come draft or whatever, because they're not playing in the GP anymore. And that means that Donnie, John, and Gale up a game on the 2 end tables, with only John losing his first game to Ruben, which we saw in pretty short order there. This, however, is Andrew Cuneo battling back against Donnie in Legacy, and Andrew's got some pretty cool stuff in this deck. The chat caught a glimpse of it earlier. He's got Quicken. Just to throw a little spice in there. Council's Judgment. I like this.
What about
deck a lot.
Supreme Verdict?
Supreme Verdict? You know what would be better? He probably said one day, if that was an instant. And he kind of built that himself now.
Yeah. I thought what was also pretty nice there was Donnie going probe and seeing Supreme Verdict. Cuneo doesn't seem to have a much more efficient way of dealing with Empty the Warden's tokens. So this was a way for him to basically like fight that. And he's also got Flusterstorm and Force of Will, so and the Jace for later. So he's got plenty of protection for this turn.
Now, when Donnie sees that, though, if he is trying to go off with that Empty the Warrens in his hand, I mean, what can he do? Wait till he finds a discard spell or something before trying to go off? Like, how does he actually adjust? Because, that's going to be a tough card to deal with. You can't counter it.
Right. So he does have an answer. He has a Cabal Therapy I got a glimpse of.
Okay, so he can try to take it away.
Right. But this is actually a really interesting... He decided not to go for it. Although he had access to essentially Cabal Therapy, I didn't believe that he had a red source. So the problem was that he couldn't really cast the Empty the Warrens anyways. So there wasn't much of a point going off for that reason. So now the plans on Ivor's side is Donnie's going to try to set up. He's going to try to set up in such a way to beat Flusterstorm and Force of Will, which is totally doable with the Cabal Therapy and duress that are in his hand. And Andrew is going to have to, at some point, resolve something that allows him to have card advantage or a threat. Because otherwise, he's going to be way too far behind. So yeah, this turn, Donnie probably is going to just fire off the Cabal Therapy and trade it for whatever card.
Okay, there we go. Cabal Therapy goes on the stack, just as you say that, Eduardo. And he's going to name something.
He may, sure, if it resolved, but he's probably not going to get a chance because Andrew knows that, with the Jutaxian Probe, it's not going to miss. So it's the classic, there's a discard spell, I have a counter spell. Well, rather than give you the option as to what to take, I'm going to just choose what you take. It also conceals the last card that Andrew drew, which might be relevant down the line depending on what that was. But yeah. What would have been really fun there would have been if Andrew had top decked a Brainstorm.
Oh, yeah.
Cabal Therapy and Brainstorm in response to Cabal Therapy is probably one of the funnest moments in Legacy.
That is great.
So, that was very interesting. And
what just happened right there?
Right. Basically, Donnie kept on top with Ponder. And Andrew knew this. So Andrew went, I don't want you to... I know that you want this card, so I don't want you to have it. So I'm going to predict targeting you to get rid of the card. And most likely, the third card is not something you want, so I'm going to force you to draw it.
That is great. What a cool sequence.
Yeah. That was actually really heads-up play in my view. Like... It basically means that Donnie's probably going to draw a card that's not great. And because it was a fetch land, Andrew knows this. There's a high chance that that card is not something that Donnie wants.
And look at this. Andrew's going to slam Jace the Mind Sculptor now. Says, may I borrow a dice? And this could easily propel him into this mid to late game. He's going to use the 0 ability, and Brainstorm will let him do that. Rich, you have an update for us. Are you going to tell us who won this match? Or?
I was just looking at the screen and thinking, now, was I just watching this one? I don't think I was.
This one's live. Don't worry, you're safe.
Thank God. So, you just mentioned Jace TMS, the Mind Sculptor.
Oh, yeah.
I've just seen Brian Brown doing, a former world champion, of course, Ultimate Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Ultimated?
Yep. To take his, got to 13 and so on.
Wow.
And, so, he's 1-0 up over Keahi Kanishi, which sounds fine. And then Seth Manfield, another former world champion, sitting there at 1-1 against John Asbach, who's just won game 2 with Dredge. But the big news is that Cale Ormans on Team Energy has defeated Frank Scarron, the third member of the big pro team, if you like. So, if Asbach can win game 3 against Manfield, or Keahi Kanishi can fight back against BBD, double world
Knocking
champions
out
could
that team?
be out.
Whew.
But, that said, if either Manfield or BBD win a game, they're through to day 2. They can still win the whole thing at 6-2.
Okay. Good stuff. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it. And in the meantime, let's get back to business on Jace the Mind Sculptor dominating this board state. What's going on here, though? I looked away for a minute to talk to Rich, and all of a sudden the graveyard got full. What happened here?
Well, while Jace the Mind Sculptor is dominating the board, Donnie decided to dominate the stack.
Okay.
Basically went for the combo of Lion's Eye Diamond and Infernal Tutor, basically transforming those cards into Black Lotus and Demonic Tutor. And got a Pass in Flames, which allows Donnie to essentially recast a bunch of these cards.
So he's going off.
Yeah, this is basically it.
Okay.
Like, basically, he went, Cabal, I'm going to Ritual to have extra black mana, take your Force of Will, and that was it.
How many drills? 10 drills. And that is plenty enough. Well, of agony. And that is, in fact, going to do it. Andrew does not have the answer he needed. And a good match there from Donnie Yeh. He's able to defeat Andrew Cuneo and win his match and put his team just one away. If Gale can finish off Paul Rietzl here, they're going to advance and knock off this power team.
It's pretty powerful.
How's she looking here in the game number 2?
So here it seems like Paul is very far behind.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
So let's see what's going on here. Those counters are -1/-1 counters from that if near dead lands.
Okay.
So the situation is, those are not +1/+1. The situation isn't quite that dire. Although the second Ferociton...
Getting more dire.
Yeah, the fact that it fights the Harvester and the fact that Paul only has one card that is clearly not dealing with his board means that Gale is probably going to take it up.
It seems like Gale is going to win her match 2-0 over Rietzl and propel her team to day 2. Yeah. Wow, Andrew Cuneo, Steve Rubin, and Paul Rietzl, I would not peg them for not making a day 2 here in this field, but it looks like Gail Henberger, John Rowe, and Donnie Yeh are poised to do just that as she's adding 2 haste creatures to the board, and that's lethal. She wins the match, and the round goes to Gail Henberger, John Rowe, and Donnie Yeh. 2 matches to 0, and they're going to send the pros packing. Congratulations. Great stuff. And that is going to do it for round 8. Oh, boy. Did not expect that one. That was a big upset there to put them into day 2.